Good day, everyone. Welcome to grade 12 life science revision. So today we'll be covering the topic human endocrine system. Okay, so this topic falls under paper 1 in our paper or in our life science examinations, as you guys might have seen during the prelim examinations, and it comprises of 20 marks. Right, so guys, remember that there are different cognitive level questions during the examination. So 40% of the paper would be questions about knowing signs, then 25% of the questions would be about your understanding of science, and then 20% would be about applying the scientific knowledge that you have studied. Then 15% would be about evaluating, analyzing, as well as synthesizing, right? Okay, so just a few study tips, guys. Time management is very important. Do ask for help where you are struggling and practice. Do past papers, do activities in your textbook, get enough exercise, eat a healthy diet, and drink plenty of water. And most importantly, do not panic, especially on the day of the examination. Right. Then we can get into the learning outcomes and a summary of this presentation. So we'll be looking at the overview of the human endocrine system. We'll also be looking at the endocrine glands, negative feedback mechanisms, as well as disorders of the endocrine system. Okay, so in the previous video, we looked at the nervous system, and we did say that the nervous system and endocrine system, they help us to control, or rather they help the body to control and coordinate its activities in response to changes in both the external as well as the internal environment. Right, so we said that the nervous system as well as the endocrine system are needed for our survival. And so now we just want to look at the difference between the nervous system as well as the endocrine system. Okay, so the nervous system consists of neurons, whereas the endocrine system consists of glands. Okay, then when we look at the nervous system, information is transmitted in the form of nerve impulses, but in the endocrine system, information is transmitted in the form of chemical messengers, which we call hormones, right? Then in the nervous system, nerve impulses travel along the nerve fibers, whereas in the endocrine system, the hormones travel in the blood. Then when we go back to the nervous system, information travels very quickly, right? But then in the endocrine system, information travels slowly. Okay. Then affects the action of effectors that is in the nervous system. So we have impulses which affect the action of effectors, and then also in the endocrine system, the hormones affect the action of the target organs, right? Then lastly, in the nervous system, we have an effect of a nerve impulse. It does not last very long. As an example would be the reflex action. Okay, but then in the endocrine system, the effect of the hormone lasts very long. All right, so these are just important differences between the nervous system as well as the endocrine system that we should note. Okay. Then we move on to the overview of the endocrine system. Okay, so as mentioned, the endocrine system is made up of glands that produce as well as secrete hormones directly into the blood. Okay, so now the role of the endocrine system is to control and coordinate the life processes in the body in response to the changes that happen in both the internal as well as the external environment to maintain a constant internal environment, right? So the aim of this process or this system is to maintain homeostasis, right? Now, a gland is a group of cells that are specialized to produce and secrete specific chemical substances such as a specific hormone, right? Then we have an endocrine gland. So endocrine, we have two types of glands, guys. Remember, we have an exocrine gland and we also have an endocrine gland. So an exocrine gland is a gland that has ducts, and then an endocrine gland does not have ducts. Okay, so it's also called a ductless gland. Okay, so it secretes hormones. It secretes the hormones they produce directly into the blood, right? And then a hormone is a chemical substance that is produced and secreted in very small amounts into the bloodstream by the endocrine glands. Then they transfer information from one set of body cells to another set of body cells in order to coordinate the functions of different parts of the body. Then each hormone controls the functioning of a specific organ in the body, and we call that organ the target organ, right? So the organ in which the hormone acts on, we call it the target organ. And you know that in the nervous system, that organ that a nerve impulse acts on, we call it the effector, right? Okay, so here in this figure 7.2 from the Macmillan textbook, it says hormones secreted by endocrine glands travel in the blood to their organs. So here we have hormones which are secreted by an endocrine gland into the blood. Okay, so we have the cells of the gland, which are in blue. Then we have our blood capillary. Then we have our hormones, which are the black dots right there. Then we have the red blood cell, which is in red. So now these hormones are released from the cells of the gland into the blood capillary, and the hormones are now in the blood capillary in the second picture. It says that hormones are transported in the blood around the body, and that is the blood cell, and then they finally travel to the target organ, and in this case the target organ is the kidney, right? So hormones reach the target organ, and that would be their final destination, right? Okay, so now let's look at the various endocrine glands that we find. Okay, but before that, endocrine glands secrete hormones into blood vessels that then transport them to the target organs or the target sites. Then endocrine glands, we refer to them as the working parts of the endocrine system because they do what? They secrete or they produce chemical messengers that influence metabolic activities of the cell. All right, so now in this figure here, we are showing the different types of endocrine glands we find. So we have the pineal gland, which is located right there in the brain. Then we have the hypothalamus. Then we have the pituitary gland. Then we have the thyroid gland. Then we also have the thymus, the pancreas, the adrenal glands, which are just located above the kidneys. Then we have the testes in males, and then the ovaries in females. And so those are the type of endocrine glands that we find in humans. Okay. Then hormones and their functions. So hormones can act synergistically or antagonistically, right? Then hormones may be oversecreted, and when hormones are oversecreted, we refer to that as hypersecretion, and when they are undersecreted, we refer to that action as hyposecretion. Okay, so hypersecretion as well as hyposecretion results in certain disorders because there is no balance, right? And then the functions of hormones, firstly, it is to regulate secretions from the endocrine or the exocrine gland. Remember the difference between endocrine and exocrine is that endocrine glands do not have ducts, but exocrine glands have ducts. Okay, and then another function of hormone is that they control growth and development of the body. Next function of the hormone is that they maintain homeostasis. Next function is that they regulate metabolism and energy release, and they react to unexpected external as well as internal stimuli. So, with regards to internal stimuli, it would be emergency situations through signals communicated by sensory neurons. Right. Then finally, they control the process of reproduction, as we have covered in the topic of reproduction in vertebrates. Okay. Then we are going to look at the different types of endocrine glands and as well as the hormones that they release and where they are located exactly. Okay, so the first endocrine gland that we're going to look at is the hypothalamus. Right, so the hypothalamus produces the anti-diuretic hormone. So this is the hormone that we usually call ADH, and you guys might remember ADH from grade 11 on the topic of excretion, right? So ADH is stored in the pituitary gland, but it is produced in the hypothalamus, right? And then the target organ for ADH is the kidney, right? Then what does it do in the kidney? It controls the concentration of water in the blood, right? So the hypothalamus is located, just get my cursor at them. So the hypothalamus is located right there, just on top of the pituitary gland, right? So you might also know the location or remember the location of the hypothalamus from the nervous system when we were looking at the structure of the brain. Okay. Okay, then the next gland that we are going to look at is the pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland, as mentioned previously, it is located just below the hypothalamus, and then we have the posterior lobe as well as the anterior lobe. Okay, so the hormones produced by the pituitary gland, firstly, it is what we call growth hormone. Okay, and then in short, we can just call it GH. So growth hormone stimulates protein synthesis and the growth of muscles as well as bones. It also promotes the breakdown of fats instead of glucose as an energy source. Right? Then the next hormone that we have that is released by the pituitary gland is the thyroid stimulating hormone, and in short, we usually call it TSH. So it stimulates the thyroid gland to produce the hormone thyroxine. Right, so the target organ for thyroid stimulating hormone is the thyroid gland, right? And it causes it to produce the hormone thyroxine, which regulates the concentration of a thyroxine in the blood. Then we will look at the function of thyroxine once we get to the thyroid gland. Then we have a follicle stimulating hormone. In short, it is FSH, and you guys would know this from reproduction. So FSH stimulates the development of follicles in the ovaries in females and the production of sperm in testes, right, in males. Okay, then the next hormone, which is secreted by the pituitary gland, is the luteinizing hormone, and you guys know this hormone back from reproduction. So LH in females causes the Graafian follicle to mature into the corpus luteum, and it stimulates the secretion of hormones, estrogen, as well as progesterone by the ovaries. Lastly, LH stimulates the secretion of the hormone testosterone in the testes. Okay. Then we have a prolactin, which is also a hormone that is secreted by the pituitary gland, and it stimulates the production of breast milk. So the target organ for prolactin would be the mammary glands. Okay, so that's where breast milk is produced. Right, so then we move on. So here, guys, we just have a summary of the hormones which are secreted by the pituitary gland. It is the growth hormone. If we start here and move in a clockwise direction, it is growth hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone, prolactin, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone. So you guys can call it GH, TSH, prolactin, LH, as well as FSH, right? Then we're going to look at the thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland is located right here, just below or behind rather the larynx and the trachea, right? Just around it there, around the larynx and the trachea. That is where we get our thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland um, hormones control the body's metabolism. Okay, the thyroid secretes hormones that control the body's metabolism, and that hormone we know it as a thyroxine. Okay, so thyroxine controls the rate of all chemical reactions, including physical growth as well as the development of the body. Very important to note. Okay, then we move on to the next gland, which is the pancreas. And in the pancreas, we'll be looking particularly at the islets of Langerhans. Okay, so here we have our pancreas. So remember, the pancreas is both the endocrine as well as an exocrine gland, and you would remember it from the digestive system that you guys dealt with last year. Right, so let's just go through the information here. It says endocrine portion has the islets of Langerhans, and they secrete hormones into the blood. Then the exocrine portion of the pancreas secretes the digestive enzymes into the duct, leading to the small intestine. Right, so you guys might remember what we mentioned earlier on, that the difference between the endocrine gland as well as exocrine gland is that the endocrine gland does not have ducts, and that is why we also call it a ductless gland. Right? Okay, so islets of Langerhans, we have the secretion of glucagon, right, which increases blood glucose levels, right? So in the islets of Langerhans, we have alpha as well as beta cells, right? And then the alpha cells are the ones that release, or rather that secrete the hormone glucagon, right? And then when the hormone glucagon is secreted, then blood glucose levels need to increase. Therefore, glucagon will act on the liver to break down glycogen into glucose, right, in order to increase blood glucose levels. And then the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans, they secrete insulin. And we know insulin reduces what? Blood glucose levels. So insulin would act on our muscle cells, on our adipose tissue, as well as the liver, right? So it would take in more glucose from the body and turn it into glycogen and store it as glycogen in order to reduce the glucose levels in the blood, right? So very important to note that we have glucagon as well as insulin, which are secreted by the islets of Langerhans found in the pancreas. Right. Then the next gland that we'll be looking at is the adrenal glands. Okay, so the adrenal glands secrete adrenaline, which prepares the body for a flight or fight response. Okay, so important. Adrenaline prepares the body for a fight or flight response, and it does this by increasing the rate as well as the depth of breathing. It stimulates the conversion of glycogen to glucose, and then it also increases the heart rate and also decreases the blood supply to the skin as well as the digestive system. And then another hormone which is secreted by the adrenal glands is aldosterone, right? Aldosterone. So the target organ for aldosterone is the kidney, and it regulates salt concentration in the blood. Right. So guys, just another note, adrenaline has another name which we call epinephrine, right? And then aldosterone is also called norepinephrine. Right? So if you see that word used, just know that it either refers to adrenaline or aldosterone. Right? So the other name for adrenaline is epinephrine, and then the other name for the hormone aldosterone is norepinephrine. Okay. And so the adrenal glands are just located above the kidney and the kidneys, because we have two of them. So we have the right adrenal gland as well as the left adrenal gland. Okay. And in the adrenal gland, we have the cortex as well as the medulla. Okay, then the next endocrine gland that we will be looking at is the ovaries. Okay, so important ovaries are found in females, right? So it's a form of a gonad, right? And they are located there in the abdomen of females. So we have our endometrium, the fallopian tube, and the ovary. Okay, so when plural form of ovary is ovaries, and then we have our uterus, the cervix, the vagina, which is the opening to the outside, as well as the vulva. Okay. So the ovaries, they secrete the hormone estrogen. Okay, and estrogen, as we might remember from reproduction, it promotes the development of female secondary characteristics during puberty. Okay, so it promotes the development of female secondary characteristics during puberty. And remember, that includes the growth of body hair, the increase in hip width, as well as the increase in the size of the pelvis, etc. Right. Another thing that estrogen actually does is that it is also involved in the thickening of the endometrium. Okay, so remember, the thickening of the endometrium allows for proper implantation to take place. Then another hormone that the ovaries secrete is progesterone. Okay, so progesterone stimulates the thickening of the endometrium and the maintenance thereof, and it also maintains the functioning of the uterus and prevents ovulation. Right. So this is all. This happens so that implantation of the fertilized ovum can take place. Right. Then we move on to the testes. So the testes are found in males, and testes, they secrete testosterone, which promotes the development of secondary characteristics during puberty in males. Right, and then some of these secondary characteristics in males include the growth of body hair as well as the deepening of the voice. Okay, then another function of testosterone is that it stimulates sperm production. Right? It stimulates sperm production, and testes are located right there in the scrotum. Right, so we have our scrotum there, and then the testes are inside the scrotum. Then there is a penis, and the bladder is located right there. Yeah. Right. So, guys, here is a summary of basically the hormones as well as the endocrine glands that we went through. So this summary is found in the Mind the Gap textbook. We have the hypothalamus, which secretes ADH, and we had mentioned that ADH's target organ is the kidney, and it controls the concentration of water in the blood. The thyroid gland, which produces thyroxine, that controls basic metabolic rates. Then we have the adrenal gland, which secretes adrenaline as well as aldosterone. Then we have the ovary, which is only found in females, and it secretes estrogen as well as progesterone. Then we also have the testes found in males, and it secretes testosterone, which stimulates the maturation of sperm cells and stimulates puberty in males. Then we have the pancreas, the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, and those secrete glucagon. Remember, it is the alpha cells that secrete glucagon, and the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans, which secrete insulin, and insulin stimulates the conversion of glucose to glycogen, and therefore reducing blood glucose levels. Right, and then the pituitary gland, which secretes quite a few hormones. We have growth hormone, which is released which is secreted by the pituitary gland, and it controls growth. We have thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulates the thyroid gland, stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxine. Then it also releases reproductive hormones, FSH, LH, as well as prolactin. So the follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the development of the follicle in the ovaries. Then we have the luteinizing hormone, which stimulates ovulation and stimulates development of the corpus luteum. Then prolactin, which stimulates the mammary glands to secrete as well as produce milk. Right. So this summary here, you can find it in the Mind the Gap study guide. Then we have a question. A gland whose secretion is deposited directly into the blood is A, thyroid, B, adrenal, C, both A and B, or is it D, neither A nor B? So the question is asking which gland's secretion rather is deposited directly into the blood. Okay, so now the type of gland that we are looking for here is an endocrine gland. Okay, because there's a deposition of the hormone directly into the blood and not in ducts, right? So we're looking for an endocrine gland, and we know that the thyroid as well as the adrenal are both endocrine glands. So therefore, our answer needs to be C, which says both A and B, right? Then we can move on to the next question. During chemical coordination, A, messages travel slowly and by a hormone. B, messages travel faster and by an impulse. Or is it C, messages travel faster and by a hormone? Or D, messages travel slower and by an impulse? Right, so in this question, we need to remember the differences between the nervous system as well as the endocrine system. So in the nervous system, we have a message or information which travels fast via an impulse, right? So let's see if we can get that option. A message that travels fast and by an impulse would be B, right? And then we also have, in terms of endocrine coordination, we have messages that travel slow and by a hormone. Messages that travel slow and by a hormone. And when we talk about chemical coordination, we are referring to the endocrine system. Therefore, our answer in this question would be A. So the messages in chemical coordination travel slowly and by a hormone, right? Then we can move on to the next question. The function of ADH is to A, lower the blood glucose level, B, prepare the body for an emergency, or is it C, affect the permeability of renal tubules, or D, brings about ovulation? So ADH is our antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone, and remember it is produced by the hypothalamus, but it is stored in the pituitary gland, and the target organ for ADH is the kidney. The target organ for ADH is the kidney. So firstly, if we were to use the elimination method, would cross out option D because ovulation does not take place in the kidney, and also ADH is found in both males and females, and ovulation does not occur in males. Right, so option D is out. Then if we just go back to option A, lower the blood glucose level. Right, so according to our knowledge, glucose level is controlled by hormones, glucagon as well as insulin. And glucagon and insulin are secreted by the islets of Langerhans, which are found in the pancreas. Right, so option A would be out because pH does not act on the pancreas. Right, and then B says it prepares the body for an emergency. So an emergency would be our fight or flight response, and we know that it is the fight or flight response is controlled by adrenaline, which is secreted by the adrenal glands. Right, so the adrenal glands are located just on top of the kidney. Okay, so now we are left with option C because we have crossed out option A, crossed out option B, as well as crossing out option D. And option C is our only option that is left, and it says it affects the permeability of the renal tubules. Right. So renal tubules are found where in the kidney. So the location is already correct. So the answer is C. It affects the permeability of the renal tubules. So it is secreted by A, pituitary gland, B, adrenal gland, C, thyroid gland, or is it D, the testes? So again, we can still use the elimination method and just mention the hormones which are secreted by these various glands. So if you go back to the pituitary gland, we know that the pituitary gland secretes growth hormone, and secretes as well as it secretes reproductive hormones, FSH, it secretes LH, which is the luteinizing hormone, and it secretes prolactin. Right. So then we move on to B, which is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland secretes aldosterone, and it also secretes adrenaline. Right. Then C, the thyroid gland, it secretes thyroxine, and then the testes secrete testosterone. Right. So as mentioned, that adrenal gland secretes aldosterone as well as adrenaline, which we also call norepinephrine and epinephrine. Therefore, the answer to our question here would be option B. Right. Okay, now we move on to the next segment of our presentation, which is negative feedback mechanisms. Right. So homeostasis is a process of maintaining a constant internal environment. This is both in the blood as well as tissue fluid within the body. So it enables the body to function efficiently despite changes in the external as well as the internal environment. Therefore, negative feedback mechanisms operate in the body to detect changes or imbalances in the internal environment and to restore balance. Right. So in short, guys, a negative feedback mechanism is also a way of controlling the functioning of a system by using one of the outputs of that system. Okay. So here in figure 7.12, it says the concept of negative feedback mechanism. So what would have usually is a normal concentration factor, right? And if that concentration factor increases, then we have a corrective action that needs to take place. And then once the corrective action takes place, then the concentration factor would return, let me just get my cursor there, would return back to normal. Right. So Now, the concentration factor can either increase or decrease, and now when it decreases, we also have a type of corrective action that takes place, and then the concentration factor returns to normal, and we have our balance again. Right, so that is negative feedback. Right, so there's a general sequence of events that take place when negative feedback is happening. So firstly, we have an imbalance which is detected. So there would be either an increase or a decrease of the concentration factor. Then step two is that a control center is stimulated. Always we have a control center which is stimulated. Then thirdly, the control center would respond. Then message would be sent to the target organ. Then fifth step, the target organ would respond. And then on the sixth step, it opposes or reverses the imbalance, right? And lastly, balance is restored. Okay, so step one, imbalance is detected. Then step two to step six, this is the corrective measure that takes place, or the corrective, if we just go back to the slide here, the corrective action that takes place. So the corrective action would be step two up until step six. Right. So corrective action is that the control center is stimulated. Control center would respond to stimulus. Then a message would be sent to the target organ. Remember, our messengers in the endocrine system, our chemical messengers are called hormones, right? So the hormones are sent to the target organs, then the target organ will respond to the hormone, and it will oppose or reverse that imbalance. And then lastly, which is step seven, the balance would be restored. Right. So now we're just going to look at examples of negative feedback, or what we were actually talking about right now. Okay, so firstly, we want to say we start off with a normal concentration, right? So as you guys can see, even here, we have our normal concentration factor, and in this case, we're looking at thyroxine. Okay, so we have a normal concentration of thyroxine. Thyroxine can either increase or decrease. Okay, now we are going to look at what happens when we have a hypersecretion or an increase of thyroxine, and what will happen when we have a decrease of thyroxine. So now we're just going to start off with the red arrows, okay, when the concentration of thyroxine increases. Right, so when the concentration of thyroxine increases, or when we have an imbalance, the imbalance that we detect is the increase, right, of thyroxine. Then the pituitary gland would stop secreting the thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, once the thyroid stimulating hormone stops being secreted, then the thyroid stimulating hormone concentration does what? It decreases. Okay, so the pituitary gland would be our control center. And then we have the thyroid stimulating hormone concentration, which decreases. Therefore, the thyroid gland would stop secreting thyroxine. Because in order for thyroxine to be secreted, it needs to be stimulated by thyroid stimulating hormone from the pituitary. All right. Then once the thyroid gland stops secreting hormone, that means that the concentration of a thyroxine would return to normal. Okay, and then we are back to our balance. Right. So now we move on to the blue arrows when the concentration of a thyroxine decreases. Okay. So concentration of thyroxine decreases, that is the imbalance that is detected. Then the pituitary gland would start secreting thyroid stimulating hormone, or what we call TSH. Then the TSH concentration will increase, right? Then it will stimulate the thyroid gland to start secreting thyroxine. Then concentration of thyroxine would return to normal. Then balance is restored. Right, so that is an example of negative feedback with regards to the hormone thyroxine. Right. then we can move on to the next example that we have. And in this case, we have glucose. Right, so now we have a normal concentration of glucose. Now let's see what happens when glucose increases and when blood glucose decreases. I believe you guys would remember this from last year. Remember this from last year. It was part of the topic on the digestive system. Right. So when concentration of glucose increases in the blood, then the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, they secrete insulin, right? What does insulin do? Insulin, as it increases in concentration, it absorbs glucose and converts it to glycogen as well as fat. So remember we said that the target organs for insulin is the liver, is the adipose tissue, and it is the what's the other organ again, guys? We have the liver, the adipose tissue. It's three organs. It's three organs. I just slightly forgot the third organ, but I will give it to you guys now. Now let's just continue with this loop. It says cells in the body absorb glucose and convert it to glycogen and fat. Right. Again, target organs of insulin is the muscle cells, the adipose tissue, as well as the liver. Right, got it. And then once that happens, then concentration of glucose would return to normal and a balance is restored. Right. Then when concentration of glucose decreases in the blood, this is the blue arrows now. Where the blue arrows. When concentration of glucose decreases, then the alpha cells in the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, they secrete the hormone glucagon. Right? So just don't confuse glucagon with glycogen, two different things. Yeah? The hormones here that we are dealing with is glucagon as well as insulin. Glycogen is not a hormone. Right. So now glucagon concentration will therefore increase. Then the cells in the body will break down glycogen into glucose. So glucagon acts on the liver. So the liver is the target organ for glucagon, and it would break down the stored glycogen into glucose. Then the concentration of glucose would return to normal, and then balance would be restored again. So would return to the normal concentration of glucose. Okay, then we have another example of ADH, which is our antidiuretic hormone. Okay, so when we have normal iron concentration in the blood, when there is a higher iron concentration in the blood, then more ADH is secreted by the pituitary, and it would act on the kidneys to absorb less water from the blood, and less urine is produced. Right, so then blood iron concentration decreases, then normal water concentration in the blood is restored. Okay. Then when you just go back here, we're having the normal iron concentration in the blood. Then let's say we have a lower iron concentration in the blood. Then what would happen is that less antidiuretic hormone would be secreted into the blood by the pituitary. So remember, ADH is only produced by the hypothalamus, but it is stored in the pituitary gland, right? Then the kidneys would reabsorb more water from the blood, then produce more urine, then blood iron concentration will increase, then we'll have normal water concentration in the blood. Right, so you guys might remember this from excretory system from grade 11. Okay. Then we have a question. When a change in the levels of hormones is corrected by referring the change back to the gland, which responds to the change by doing the opposite, is called A, feedback mechanism, B, negative feedback mechanism, C, positive feedback mechanism, or is the answer D, none of the above? Is it A, feedback mechanism, B, negative feedback mechanism, C, positive feedback mechanism, or is the answer D, none of the above? Okay, and the answer is B, negative feedback mechanism. Right, so that has been what we have been dealing with in the few previous slides. Right. Now we move on to the disorders of the endocrine system when our endocrine system is not functioning properly. Right, so now disorders are caused by hypersecretion as well as hyposecretion of hormones. Then other disorders of the system may be caused by inherited genetic disorders, diseases such as cancer, unhealthy lifestyle choices, or even the surgical removal of an endocrine gland. Right, so we're just going to look at various disorders caused by certain glands and the hormones that they would need to normally um, produce or secrete. Right, so the first hormone, or rather the first gland that we'll be looking at, or the disorder of the gland, is the thyroid associated disorders. Okay, so we have what we call hyperthyroidism, and it causes the disorder which we call Graves' disease. Okay, it causes Graves' disease, and it is caused by over secretion of thyroxine. So that is why we call it hyperthyroidism. So remember, hyper means a lot. Okay, so it's caused by the over secretion of a thyroxine, and it results in increased metabolic rate as well as accelerated mental and physical processes. So symptoms of Graves' disease would include weight loss, rapid heartbeat, hyperactivity, exoplasmic goiters that cause protruding eyeballs. Right, and then I think we have a picture here. So a person with who might have the disorder of hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease would have these protruding eyeballs right there. Okay. Then we have hypothyroidism. So we have cretinism, which usually happens in kids or we find in children, and then myxoedema, which is found in adults. Okay, so undersecretion of thyroxine results in a low metabolic rate. So in children, symptoms include slow skeletal growth, and mental development. Thick skin and protruding tongue is also seen. Hypothyroidism in adults causes myxoedema, and symptoms include always feeling cold. There's weight gain, they develop thick skin and generally slow down mentally as well as physically. Okay, so now here we have a picture of the goiter that we're talking about. So that's the goiter is usually caused by iron deficiency. Right, so goiters are caused by iron deficiency. And then we move on to pancreatic associated disorders, which get hypoglycemia. So in hypoglycemia, this is when blood glucose drops below the normal level. And then symptoms would include slow movements, and the arms and legs feel weak. So there's like a lot of fatigue going on. Then we have mental function, which is reduced. Then the person becomes pale and sweaty. Then the other disorder that occurs because of pancreatic disorders is hyperglycemia. So hyperglycemia would be blood glucose rises above the normal level, and this is what we also call diabetes. Yeah? So we have severe damage to the kidneys, eyes, nervous system, as well as the heart. Right. Then pituitary gland associated disorders. We have dwarfism, which refers to the condition in which a child's growth rate is abnormally slow. So there are various types and causes of dwarfism, but the one which is caused by the pituitary gland or pituitary dwarfism. Here we have children who grow very slowly or may even stop growing altogether due to the under secretion of growth hormone by the pituitary gland. And here we also have a picture. Figure 7.19 shows us Tracy Amare, who is the world's smallest woman. Right. Then another pituitary gland associated disorder is gigantism. So gigantism is abnormally fast growth due to over secretion of the growth hormone by the pituitary gland. So in childhood, the long bones of the body, such as the bones of the arms and legs, are still growing with excess growth hormone that is secreted. Then these bones grow longer than normal. Then oversecretion of growth hormone in adulthood can cause a condition which we call acromegaly. So in acromegaly, the bones of the face, hands, and feet become enlarged. So here, figure 7.20 says the person on the left has, or rather, person on the left with gigantism. Okay, and then figure 7.21 is the main visible features of acromegaly, which include one, enlarged facial bones, then B, we have larger than normal hands, and then in figure C, we have larger than normal feet. As you can see here, we have quite enlarged and still growing facial bones. The hands are quite big, the feet also grow bigger, right? Then we move on to the ovaries as well as testes associated disorders. So this table 20 says male and female sex hormones and their functions. We have already went through the hormone and location. We've went through the target area. We've also went through the functions of the hormones. So now we're just going to look at the effects of hypo and hypersecretion. So in the testes, if we have a hyposecretion of the testes, it would lead to sterility as well as Addison's disease. So now, such sperm which is sterile would not be able to fertilize the egg. Then when we have a hyper secretion of testosterone would have increased masculinity. So they would refer to the secondary sexual characteristics that happen during puberty. Then the rate of metabolism and growth, right? So we also have an increased rate of metabolism and growth. Right. So then when we move on to the ovaries, which secrete estrogen as well as progesterone, when we have a hyposecretion of both these hormones, Addison's disease might occur. Then when we have hyper secretion of estrogen and progesterone, would have irregular ovulation cycles, the softening of bones, and then unusual development of the uterus. Right. We have a question. So a disease in which the hormonal control of blood glucose is defective because of a deficiency of insulin is A, marasmus, B, diabetes mellitus, C, both A and B, or is it D, none of the above? And this question is fairly easy. It would be D, diabetes mellitus. And you could just answer this question with your grade 11 knowledge. All right, guys, just an important study tool, concept maps. Right, so remember I did mention in one of the previous videos that we should not study all these topics in isolation because somehow, somewhere they connect. Right, so a beautiful example would be the endocrine system as well as the nervous system. There are certain organs that we find or glands that we find in the endocrine system, and they also play a role where in the nervous system. Example, the hypothalamus as well as the pituitary gland. And so we find both these organs in the endocrine system as well as the nervous system. Right. So concept maps help us to basically see the relationship between certain concepts. So you guys can see here, this is from Simplified Biology. It doesn't summarize the whole chapter of endocrine system, of course, without the diseases or the disorders which are caused by hyper or hypersecretion. But you guys can obviously just continue, with the writing that if there is hypersecretion, then we get this disorder. If there's hypersecretion, we get this disorder. Okay, so I'm just going to look at one example here, and we will use the adrenal medulla. Okay, so the adrenal medulla would refer to the adrenal gland, right? So adrenal gland, as you can see, it says there, we have a relationship. It says it secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. So epinephrine is adrenaline, norepinephrine is aldosterone. Okay, and what you could have done here is basically just put epinephrine in its own box and norepinephrine in its own box, and also just mention the target organs and what it does as well. Right, so this is a great study tool, and you can do concept maps for all your topics. Right, just in summary, and also when revising as well, you can draw a concept map when just before writing an exam, right? So once you are allowed to actually start with your examination, you can just quickly on a rough paper, just draw a concept map for the various topics that you'll be addressing in that particular paper, and it will assist you very, very much. So guys, if you do need more concept maps like these, you can get them on Simply Biology. I put the website right here, and you guys can go on the website. So it has various concept maps on various topics. Just something that you guys also need to notice that there are certain glands as well as hormones that we don't cover in metric. So you just need to be careful with that. For example, the pineal gland, we just mentioned the pineal gland, and we don't look quite deep in the pineal gland and the hormone that it secretes, and as well as the adrenal medulla and the adrenal cortex. It is good knowledge for you to know, but I mean, if you do know that the adrenal medulla secretes these particular type of hormones, and the adrenal cortex secretes these type of hormones, but we do not focus on the adrenal cortex, right? So we do not look at the mineral corticoids as well as the glucocorticoids in metric as yet. So you will just have to eliminate that from your concept map. And let me just check here if there is anything else. Yeah, I think that is run about it. Then otherwise, everything else you guys do have to know. So if you find concept maps, if you think concept maps will be helpful for you, then please do visit the Ramitaco website to get some concept maps on various topics. And then we move on to terminology. Okay, so guys, remember again with terminology, very important. Section A, you always get a 10-mark question simply asking about biological terms, right? And then even in section B, you have to define somewhere, somehow you will get a question about defining, right? And then section C as well, sometimes you also need to first define concepts or processes before you actually answer the question or get into deep detail about the question that you do need to address. So making flashcards or mobile notes is also very much helpful because it allows you to be flexible in your studying. Okay, while walking to the kitchen, you can just grab 2 flashcards and read them on your way to the kitchen. If you're taking a walk outside, because we said that we do need to maintain a healthy exercise life, then you can just grab a few flashcards, and while on your walk you can just study while exercising as well. Right, so some of the biological terms, or rather all of the biological terms that we covered in this topic would be endocrine system, endocrine gland, which is a ductless gland that secretes its hormones directly into the bloodstream. Then we have exocrine gland. It's a gland that secretes its hormone into a duct. Then a hormone is a chemical substance that is produced and secreted in very small amounts into the bloodstream by endocrine glands. Ooh, sorry guys. Then here, this was supposed to be a new term as well. Ne? Target organ, that is the organ that responds to a hormone secreted by an endocrine gland. And then we have the hypothalamus, that's a part of the brain that acts as an endocrine gland, secreting hormones that either stimulate or suppress the release of hormones by the pituitary gland. Then we have ADH, it's the hormone produced by the hypothalamus, which is stored in the pituitary gland and allows more water to be reabsorbed the blood of the into the blood, sorry, from the kidneys, reducing the volume of lot of water lost in urine, so would act on the permeability of the renal tubules. Okay, then pituitary gland, that is the endocrine gland at the base of the brain, also known as the master gland, because it produces hormones that regulate the secretion of other hormones. Then we have the growth hormone, so that's the hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. It stimulates the protein synthesis, growth of muscles and bones, and the breakdown of fat for energy. Then a thyroid stimulating hormone, it's the hormone secreted by the pituitary gland, stimulates the thyroid glands to secrete thyroxine. Then we have FSH, which is a reproductive hormone. It is secreted by the pituitary gland and it stimulates development of follicles in the ovaries and the production of sperm in the testes. Then we have LH, which is the luteinizing hormone. It's also secreted by the pituitary gland. We have the thyroid gland, which is found at the front of the neck and it releases thyroxine. Then thyroxine is a hormone secreted by the thyroid gland and it regulates the metabolic rate and growth rate of an individual. Then we have the pancreas, it is the organ in the abdomen that functions as both an exocrine as well as the endocrine gland, and it secretes the hormones insulin as well as glucagon. So remember, insulin would reduce blood glucose and glucagon would increase blood glucose. So then islets of Langerhans are clusters of cells in the pancreas that secrete the hormones glucagon and insulin, which regulate blood glucose concentration. And we find alpha and beta cells, right? The islet of Langerhans, glucagon, it's a hormone secreted by the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans, and it raises the blood glucose concentration. And then insulin, it's the hormone secreted by the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans, and it works to lower the blood glucose concentration. So you remember the target organs of insulin would be our muscle cells, adipose tissue, as well as liver. So it would convert glycogen into it would allow these target organs to take in more glucose, right, and convert it into its stored form, which is glycogen, right? And then adrenal glands. These are endocrine glands located on top of each kidney. Then adrenaline, which is also called epinephrine, is a hormone secreted by the adrenal gland and it prepares the body for fight or flight response. Then aldosterone, that is the hormone secreted by the adrenal glands as well, and it increases the amount of sodium reabsorbed into the blood from the kidneys. Then gonad is a sexual reproductive organ, and we find ovaries and testes in it. Ovaries in females and testes in males. Ovary is a female reproductive organ. Progesterone, that's the hormone secreted by the ovaries, and it stimulates the thickening of the endometrium and maintains the lining of the uterus and prevents the release of ovum, right, during pregnancy as well and sperm production, and so it prevents ovulation. Yeah, then we have negative feedback mechanism. That's a mechanism for controlling a system. So if the concentration of one factor in the system rises above or falls below normal, the change is detected and a corrective action is taken to return the factor's concentration to normal. So you would remember those 7 steps, right? Which starts with detecting the imbalance, and then stimulating the control center, and so on and so forth. Then diabetes is a disorder of the endocrine system that causes a high blood glucose concentration. So in the case of diabetes, we would have insulin not working properly, either not being secreted or not acting on the target organs. Right, insulin resistance. This is the disorder in which the body does not respond properly to insulin secreted by the pancreas. Obesity, that's the state of being very overweight. Hyperthyroidism, disorder of the endocrine system, in which the thyroid gland is overactive and secretes too much thyroxine. Then we have hypothyroidism, that's the disorder of the endocrine system, in which the thyroid gland is underactive and secretes too little thyroxine. Then creatism, this is the condition of severely stunted physical and mental growth, which owes, sorry about that, which owes to untreated hypothyroidism in babies. Cool. Then myxedema, that's a deteriorated mental state owing to severe hypothyroidism in adults. Goiter is a enlarged thyroid gland, which is caused by iron, iron deficiency. Then we have hyperthyroidism, which is a disorder of the endocrine system in which the thyroid gland is overactive and secretes too much thyroxine. Dwarfism is a condition in which a child's growth is abnormally slow. Then pituitary dwarfism, or what we call growth hormone deficiency, is a disorder of the endocrine system that results in slow growth in children due to undersecretion of growth hormone by the pituitary gland. Right, so now we can move on to exam questions. Right, so first question that we have is question 1.5. So these are all from previous papers. So everything that we're dealing with here is from previous papers. Okay, it reads, the diagram below shows the humans, sorry, it shows the hormones involved in the homeostatic control of metabolism in the human body. Okay, so I think we see there we have a brain. Okay, so then X is a gland found around the larynx. X, the gland found around the larynx, and that would be our thyroid gland, no? The larynx in the neck. So the diagram, we see the diagram. We have a more hormone A that's showing there. So there is some sort of imbalance which is detected because more hormone A is released, and then when we get to the side, we have less hormone A which is released. Okay. Then when we just go back to the diagram, if we just get here, it says less hormone B is released. So if we have more hormone A, then it acts on X, and then less hormone B is released, and it seems like it's acting on this part of the brain. And when we have less hormone A being released, it acts on X, then more hormone B is released. Okay. Question 1.5.1. Identify each of the following. 5.5, sorry, 1.5.1a. The gland that secretes hormone A. The gland that secretes hormone A. So remember, hormone A is acting on the gland which is labeled X, which is found around the larynx, and we have already developed that X is the thyroid gland. Okay, and we know that there is a gland in in the region of the brain which acts on the thyroid gland, right? So the gland that releases or secretes what? The thyroid stimulating hormone, and that gland would be the pituitary gland. Or if you wrote the hypothesis, then it would also be correct. Okay, then question 1.5.1b, hormone B. Hormone B. So that would be thyroxine. Okay, so hormone B, as you guys can see, it's released from a gland X, which we said it's the thyroid gland. Okay, then question 1.5.2, name the mechanism in the diagram that regulates the level of hormone B. So that would be negative feedback, right? Negative feedback mechanism, you get your 1 mark. Then question 1.5.3, half of gland X, the thyroid gland, was surgically removed in a person. State 2 possible effects that this would have on the secretion of the hormones referred in the diagram above. So if the thyroid gland, if half of it was surgically removed, we need to state 2 possible effects of that surgical procedure. Right? So we know that the thyroid gland secretes what? Secretes thyroxine, meaning that it would have less thyroxine being secreted, or less hormone B being secreted. Right? And then more TSH will be secreted. Right? More thyroid stimulating hormone would be secreted because thyroxine levels in the body, or yeah, in the body would be low. All right, and then we would have more thyroxine stimulating hormone being secreted because we need to up the levels of thyroxine. Okay, and we can move on to the next question. It's also question 1.5. So study the flow diagram. We have high levels of blood glucose, organ 1. Let's start here. Organ 1. Okay, cool. Organ 1, which looks like a pancreas, releases hormone 2, which acts on the liver, and releases hormone 3, which also acts on the liver. Then the liver says increases blood glucose level, and this one it decreases blood glucose level. Then when we have low levels of blood glucose, it acts on the pancreas. High levels of blood glucose also act on this pancreas or organ 1. Okay, so this is also just a diagram illustrating negative feedback mechanism. Right, then we get to the questions. Question 1.5.1. Remember, guys, if you are watching via YouTube, you guys can stop the video, just answer the questions quickly, and then you can replay the video, not replay, but like play it again so that we go through the answers together. Right. Organ 1 is the pancreas, as mentioned, okay? And that is 1 mark. Then question 1.5.2, hormone 2. Hormone 2. This is high levels of blood glucose, stimulate the pancreas and then releases this hormone. And then this hormone will act on the liver to decrease blood glucose levels. There would be insulin, insulin, because it would stimulate the liver to do what? To absorb more glucose from the blood and convert it into its stored form, which is a glycogen. And then question 1.5.3, hormone 3, that would be glucagon. Then question 1.5.4, the disorder caused when organ 1 fails to release sufficient amounts of hormone 2. The disorder which is caused when organ 1 fails to release sufficient amounts of hormone 2. So hormone 2, we said it is insulin, and we know that the disorder which is caused when the pancreas does not release too much insulin, we have hyperglycemia, or what we call diabetes mellitus. Right. Then question 1.5.5, the mechanism that controls the levels of glucose in the body. The mechanism that controls the levels of glucose in the body, that would be negative feedback mechanism. Right. So this question is part of section 1, or rather section A, which are our short questions. And then we move on to the next question, which is question 3.3, and it reads, an investigation was conducted to determine the effect of different amounts of thyroxine on metabolic rate. Okay, so guys, as you are actually going through this question, especially in your tests and exams, I would advise that you read through the questions using a pencil or a colored pen and underline the important notes or information that you are given. Right? Because most of the time in extracts like this, answers are given. You know, you ask questions and you find the answers in what you were supposed to read or what you were supposed to observe while reading. Okay, so if we start again, it says an investigation was conducted to determine the effect of different amounts of thyroxine. So would underline determine effect of amount of thyroxine on metabolic rate. Because it's an investigation, we know that there will be a dependent or independent variable, and we need to immediately just note those things as we are reading the passage. Okay, the procedure was as followed. 9 healthy adult male rats were used. They were divided into 3 groups of 3 rats each, which is group A, B, and C. All 3 groups were kept in the same environment in 3 separate cages. Then each group received the same amount of water. Each group was given a different diet. Their initial mass was taken. Then 3 weeks later, the mass was taken again. Their oxygen consumption was also measured. Okay, so let's see diet X. This was food containing all essential nutrients. Then diet Y is food containing all the essential nutrients and an extract of thyroxine. Then diet Z is food containing all the essential nutrients and chemical that inhibits the effect of thyroxine. So it says that the table shows the results of the investigation. Then let's just look at group A of the rats. After 3 weeks, they increased, their average mass increased to 321 from 319. Then B, their average mass increased from 320 grams, or rather decreased, sorry, from 320 grams to 309 grams. And then in group C, the mass increased from 318 grams to 340 grams. Right. And question 3.3.1. Oh, sorry. There is a note, and I hope you guys saw it. It says Group A was given diet X. Group A was given diet X. That's food containing all the essential nutrients. Then question 3.3.1. Name the groups A, B, or C in which the average mass of the rats increased. Name whether group A, B, or C in which the average mass of the rats increased. Guys, to answer this question, you just need to look at the table, right? You have initial average mass of the rats as well as the mass after 3 weeks. So you can observe that straight from the table. And according to our question here, or rather the mark allocation, it is 2 marks. So there are 2 groups in which the average mass of the rats increased. And if you see there, it would be group A, and you would get your mark for mentioning group A as well as mentioning group C. Then question 3.3.2, for this investigation, state there A, independent variable, then B is looking for the dependent variable and how it was measured. The independent variable and the dependent variable. So the independent variable would be the amount of thyroxine, And then sorry about that. So I think we don't have the answer to question 3.3.2, which is the dependent variable. So let's just go back here to the extract. It says an investigation was conducted to determine the effect of different amounts of thyroxine, okay, on metabolic rate. Okay, so the independent variable is the amount of thyroxine, and then the metabolic rate would be our dependent variable. So that would be B. Ne? Question 3.32b is the metabolic rate, and how was it measured? It was measured by looking at average oxygen consumption, right, as well as the mass gain of the rats, right? The mass gain of the rats, right? So question 3.32, the dependent variable. Firstly, you have to say that it's the metabolic rate. How it was measured would be by looking at the average mass of the rats in this 3 weeks, right? Whether the rats increased in their mass or they decreased, right? Then we can move on to question 3.3.3, which says arrange the diets X, Y, and Z in order of increasing amounts of thyroxine that would be found in the rats after they were given these diets. Arrange the diets X, Y, and Z in order of increasing amounts of thyroxine. Okay, so firstly, would have diet Z, right? Why? Because diet Z contains all essential nutrients and a chemical that inhibits the effect of thyroxine. Then we have diet X, and finally we have diet Y, which is food containing all the essential nutrients, right? And that would be for 2 marks. So you just need to put them in the correct order and you'd get your 2 marks. Then question 3.3.4, which group B or C was given diet Y? Which group B or C was given diet Y? So diet Y is a food containing all essential nutrients and an extract of thyroxine. So it would be group B. Why do we say group B? Because group B decreased in weight, right? So remember, thyroxine, it helps with metabolic processes of metabolic rate, right? It increases metabolic rate, right? So it would be group B because, their metabolic rate was quite fast and they actually lost some weight, right? Their mass decreased. Okay, then question 3.3.5 says refer to the changes in the mass and oxygen consumption of the rats in the table above. Explain your answer to question 3.3.5. So it's basically supplementing or motivating our answer in question 3.3.4. So we said the mass of the rats decreased from 320 grams to 309 grams since the body fat is used, and you would get 2 marks for just mainly stating those two sentences. And then the oxygen consumption was the highest, indicating an increased rate of metabolism, which was caused by a higher thyroxine concentration, and you would get 3 marks for stating that, and that would actually make up the 5 marks, the maximum 5 marks that you could get for this question. But you have an additional sentence which says diet Y is the only diet that contains thyroxine. You would also get your mark, but the maximum marks you can get for this question is 5. Right. Then question 3.3.6, state 3 ways in which the validity of this investigation could be increased. Okay, so the age of the rats must be the same because obviously age contributes to metabolism. And then all the rats must receive the same amount of food. Then use the same instrument to measure the mass of the rats. The rats must also be genetically similar, right? So none of the rats should have a genetic advantage over the other, right? In order to make our investigation more valid and reliable. Okay, so if you said any 3 of those or any other answer which is correct, then you would receive your 3 marks. Okay, then question 2.2. It reads, a fertility monitor measures the concentration of estrogen and luteinizing hormone in a woman's urine. A fertile period is the time when the ovum is ready to be fertilized. The graph below appears on the information sheet that is provided with the fertility monitor. So we are showing here hormone levels. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we're showing here hormone levels and then a day of the cycle. It's at around day 13. Could say that we have ovulation which takes place there. We have high fertility taking place here, and then from there it's low fertility. Then at the peak, it's the highest fertility, and after that, it's low fertility. You see that during the highest fertility, estrogen is at its peak, as well as luteinizing hormone is at its peak. But when it gets to low fertility, the levels of estrogen and luteinizing hormones decrease. Okay, then we can go to the questions. Question 2.2.1. Name the gland that secretes LH. The gland that secretes LH would be the pituitary gland. Question 2.2.2. Explain why the fertility monitor measures the concentration of LH. What is the function of the luteinizing hormone? Know that high levels of LH stimulates ovulation, right? So you can already see here that luteinizing hormone is at its peak during highest fertility. So that's 2 marks. Just mentioning that high levels of luteinizing hormone stimulate ovulation, then you would get your 2 marks. Then we move on to question 2.2.3, which says explain why some women would use a fertility monitor. Why would a woman use a fertility monitor? And that's simple, guys. To monitor their fertile periods to either prevent pregnancy or to increase chances of them falling pregnant. You get your 2 marks right there. Just for mentioning that. Then question 2.2.4, what evidence in the graph indicates that a healthy follicle is developing in the ovary during the first half of the cycle? What evidence in the graph do we see? There would be estrogen levels rising. Okay, so remember we said that the side by low fertility levels are low, but then we have a rising estrogen, and at the peak there we have a rising luteinizing hormone. Okay, then question 2.2.5. If a woman's using the fertility monitor finds that her luteinizing hormone level peaks on day 17, between which days does she experience a highest fertility? If a woman using fertility monitor finds that her LH level peaks on day 17, yeah, between which days does she experience the high fertility? So if we just go back to the graph and we look at highest fertility, it's like between 3 days. Yeah? On this graph, it shows luteinizing hormone peaking on day 13, meaning that highest fertility was between day 12 to day 14. So if it's on day 17, it means it's from day 16 to 18, right? Cool. Then question 2.2.6, explain why the fertility monitor does not measure the progesterone level in the blood to predict fertile days. Progesterone only rises after ovulation. Yeah? And the fertility monitor shows that the fertility period has already passed. All right. So you get your 3 marks for just mentioning that progesterone only rises after ovulation, and this graph of fertility monitor shows that the fertility period has already passed. And then we move on to the next question, which is question 2.4, and it reads, contraceptives are used to prevent a pregnancy. Some females use pills that contain progesterone. In one packet, there would be 28 pills, of which 21 contain different concentrations of progesterone according to the day in the cycle, and the remaining 7 will contain no progesterone. So a female has to take one pill daily at the same time in a given sequence as shown below. Okay, then the graph below shows the difference in progesterone levels during a menstrual cycle of a woman taking contraceptive pills and a woman not taking contraceptive pills. Okay, so the solid line is the woman taking pills, right? And the x-axis is basically showing us progesterone levels or concentration right there, and then here's the time in days. Okay, so the solid line is indicating a female taking pills, and then the dotted line is a woman or female who is not taking pills. All right, question 2.4.1. The estrogen levels between day 8 and 22 will remain low in the woman who takes contraceptive pills. Explain why this is the case. Explain why this is the case. So firstly, the high levels of progesterone in the pills will inhibit the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland. And you guys can see how the marks are allocated right there. If you mention that no follicle will develop, you get your mark, and hence no estrogen will be secreted, you'd also get a mark right there. So the maximum number of marks that you can get for question 2.4.1 is 4 marks. Okay, then question 2.4.2, ovulation took place on day 14 in the woman not taking contraceptive pills. Explain the evidence in the graph that supports this conclusion. So that would be the peak. Right, so the increase in progesterone level indicates that the corpus luteum has been formed. Right, so the corpus luteum has been formed. Right, and you just get your 2 marks by mentioning that there's an increase in progesterone levels, and that would mean that the corpus luteum has been formed. In question 2.4.3, suggest one reason for including pills with no hormones in the contraceptive pill packet. That the reason would be women will stay in the habit of taking a pill every day. So it creates that habit of taking a pill every day. So I believe, guys, you're seeing a pattern here of concepts which are connecting. I mean, we did contraceptive methods in reproduction, and we're also finding contraception methods in the endocrine system. Okay, so that's why I've been stressing that do not study certain topics in isolation to each other, because at some point or another they connect, right? Or they have some form of relationship. Okay, and we can move on to the next question. It says the table below shows the height variation, in 9-year-old children. The information was collected from 425 children during an investigation, and we have the height in centimeters and the number of children who have the respective height. Okay, then question 2.4.1, which hormone is responsible for stimulating the growth of young children? That would be the growth hormone. Okay, then question 2.4.2. How did the investigator ensure reliability of this investigation? Guys, we can just look at the sample size. It's quite large. Right. So if you just said has a large sample size or sample, that would be correct. A lot of children were used, that would be correct. Okay, then question 2.4.3, give the percentage of children in the investigation who were 138 centimeters to 140 centimeters in height, and show your calculation. So we would say 175 over 425. Right, so 425 is the total number of the kids who we, or our sample space rather. Then we multiplied by 100 to get our percentage, and the percentage is 41.18%. So you get your mark for showing how you did the calculation and your mark for the answer. Okay, then we move on to question 2.4.4. Draw a line graph to represent the data in the table representing the children from 140 centimeters to 146 centimeters in height, and that is for 6 marks. I hope you guys can see the line graph there. Right. So mark allocations with regards to the line graph. You get 2 marks, guys, for plotting all all your plots correctly. If all your plots are correct, then you get 2 marks. Right. Then if maybe you have 1 to 6 plots which are correct, then you'd get 1 mark. If there are no plottings which are correct, then you get 0 out of the 2. So we are left with 4 marks. The other 1 mark is located to the caption of your graph. Very important, guys. When you draw graphs, when you draw diagrams, or anything that you are drawing in life science, always put a caption of what you are doing. And your caption should always include the dependent as well as the independent variable, right? Then out of that 3 marks, remember we said 2 marks are located to the plots on the graph. The 1 mark is located for the caption. Then the other mark is located for the correct labeling of the x-axis. The other mark is located for the correct labeling of the y-axis. And then finally, 1 mark is located to giving the correct or drawing the correct type of graph. If you drew a bar graph instead of a line graph, you would lose that mark because the question requested a line graph, right? So also, guys, go look up the different types of graphs before going to write the test. Do not confuse a histogram with a bar graph. Okay, so remember, a bar graph has spaces in between, and histogram, the bars are close together or they touch one another, right? Move on to the next question. Question 2.3, it reads, gonadotropin releasing hormone is a hormone released by the hypothalamus in females. It starts a chain of events during the menstrual cycle. The following diagram is a representation of the steps during the menstrual cycle in females. Okay, so we have the hypothalamus there, which releases gonadotropin releasing hormone. Then gonadotropin releasing hormone acts on gland A. Gland A then releases FSH and LH. Then FSH and LH acts on the ovaries. Question 2.3.1. Name gland A. The gland that releases follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. It is pituitary gland. Question 2.3.2. According to the diagram, what is the function of gonadotropin releasing hormone? It stimulates gland A, which is the pituitary gland, to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Right. And you would get your 2 marks for just mentioning that. Right, then question 2.3.3. Describe the effect of FSH on the ovaries. And we have been mentioning this. It stimulates the development of primary follicle into a Harpian follicle, and you get your 2 marks. Then question 2.3.4. An ovulation indicator test can be used to predict the time of ovulation in a woman. It measures the amount of luteinizing hormone in the blood or the urine. And then it says, explain why a woman who wants to fall pregnant would use an ovulation indicator test. Why would they want to do that? To increase their chances, right? So the level of luteinizing hormone increases just before ovulation takes place. You get your 1 mark, and this indicates the period of highest fertility in females, right? And when a woman knows when their highest fertility is, it would increase their chances of getting pregnant, right? Or falling pregnant. Question 2.3.5. In some females, too little progesterone is secreted. Explain one problem this could cause in a female who is trying to fall pregnant. So, guys, just another thing, the function of progesterone, it works in the thickening of the endometrium, right, or maintains the lining of the uterus or the endometrium. Okay, so the endometrium will not be thick enough if too little of it is produced, and that would cause a fertilized ovum not to implant, or if you also mentioned that the endometrium will not be maintained, meaning that a miscarriage could take place, then that would also be correct, right? Then we move on to question 3. The diagram below represents the interaction between two important endocrine glands. The gland labeled A is found at the base of the brain, while the gland labeled C is present towards the front of the neck. Question 3.1.1, give the label for gland A. Gland A would be our pituitary gland. 3.1.2, name hormone B. Hormone B is acting on the thyroid gland, so that would be the thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. Then 3.1.3, state two functions of hormone D. Hormone D is released by the thyroid gland and it is thyroxine, so it controls metabolism and influences heart rate. Question 3.1.5, describe the negative feedback mechanism that operates when the level of hormone D is higher than normal in the blood. Okay, so firstly, you mentioned your detection. Yeah? Remember those 7 steps? We mentioned the imbalance that we detect. So high levels of thyroxine is detected by the pituitary gland, which leads to a decrease. So pituitary gland is our control center, leads to a decrease in the secretion of TSH. Yeah? Then after decreasing TSH, activity of the thyroid is slowed down. That's the reaction or response. Then thyroxine levels would drop back to normal. Right. And that is it. Get your 5 marks. Then question 3.2.1. No? Before we get to the question, let's read the information. The endocrine system plays a role in helping a person to cope during a dangerous situation. Then we go to the question. Question 3.2.1. Name the hormone that is secreted in the person's body in response to a dangerous situation. The flight or fight. That hormone that causes a fight or flight response is adrenaline. Yeah? Then question 3.2.2, state 3 effects that the hormone in question 3.2.1 has on the body. So if you said it increases the heart rate, you get your mark, increase in blood pressure, increase the blood supply to the heart or skeletal muscles, increases the rate of breathing, stimulates the conversion of glycogen to glucose, you would get your mark. So the maximum number of marks you can get for question 3.2.2 is 3 marks. Okay, so guys, again, very important for these type of questions. The first 3 answers you provide, those will be marked. So when writing multiple answers, make sure that you write the ones that you are very, very confident of first, right? Write the ones that you are very confident of first, because the first answers or the first 3 would be marked. Right. Then we also have the addition of pupils. Right. So just some extra questions for you guys to do at home for extra practice and mastering this topic. So we have a long question here which says the nervous system and endocrine system help to protect the human body. Use suitable examples to describe how this is achieved through a reflex action and by the hormone adrenaline. Use your own paper to answer the question. Okay, so this is from a past paper, 2012 November, paper 2. So you guys can just do that for extra practice and mastering the topic. And we have more questions here, which is question 2.1 about information on a graph, and question 1.5. Okay, so guys, textbooks that we utilized for this presentation was the grade 12 Macmillan Solutions for All Life Science textbook, the Mind the Gap study guide, and we also have the ACID study guide and Study and Master Life Science grade 12 textbooks, which you guys can still get on Snaplify, sorry. And then Guys, for past papers, you can just download this app. It is the JSDT, né? Grade 12 Life Science app. It has various past papers that you guys can use. Video, guys, please do stay tuned. We will be looking at homeostasis in humans. All right, then thank you very much for joining in today. If you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to send an email to STEM Digital School at africateengeeks.co.za. Have yourself a beautiful day. Goodbye.